Welcome into practice today, presented by SiriusXM. I'm Olivia Landis, joined by Eric Allen. And later on in the show, we'll hear from team reporter Ethan Greenberg down on the field. But as you can see, Jets players are officially prepping for week 1 of the regular season. They'll open at home at MetLife Stadium, taking on the Buffalo Bills. It's pretty exciting times here at One Jets Drive.
Right on cue as we open up the show, Liv, the music goes on, and the music will be on at MetLife Stadium Sunday, 1 p.m. An exciting time for this organization. Remember, after an exhaustive search, they hired Adam Gase in the offseason to be their head coach. Then they followed that up in June and hired Joe Douglas to be their general manager. And some news on the business side this week is Jaime Elhai, a former intern way back in 2000 who's been with this organization for 2 decades, was named president. So listen, a lot of new here, a new leadership structure under Christopher Johnson, and a lot of new personnel on the field. Expectations are high, I think, internally, and also the fan base has a reason right now when you're looking at this team and an improved talent base. They have a reason for expectations the 2019 season, and it gets all underway against the Bills.
One word that owner Christopher Johnson actually used to describe this offseason and now the regular season is change. There's been a lot of change that this team and organization has undergone, and actually some more change. Head coach Adam Gase addressed the media today for his press conference and opened up with who the captains will be for the 2019 season. Let's hear from Gase.
We'll have 6 of them. It'll be C.J. Mosley, Jamal Adams, Steve McClendon, Sam Darnold, Kelvin Beachum, and Rontez Miles. So it was interesting to kind of go through that whole voting process, and those guys were clear-cut guys that were at the top, and I think it just shows the leadership strength that we have in this locker room.
Pretty exciting news. Gase there announced 6 different names. Some of those you might expect: Sam Darnold, Jamal Adams, and it's a really good opportunity for these players to take leadership of this team. So what do you think? What were your initial thoughts on the 6 names he announced?
Well, we're watching Gase right now walk the practice field with equipment manager Vito Contento, a longtime Jet employee here. And Gase has raved about the leadership of the guys throughout the 2019 offseason. He likes what he's seen in terms of their work ethic, the way they've had a business-like approach. And you mentioned the 6 captains that the team voted on. Sam Darnold, we're all expecting him to take a leap in year 2. A veteran offensive lineman, his left tackle, Kelvin Beachum. Defensively, you have leaders at all 3 levels. You talk about Jamal Adams, a star in the National Football League entering his 3rd season. C.J. Mosley, the veteran quarterback of your defense who comes in after 5 great seasons with the Baltimore Ravens. Steve McClendon, the veteran philosopher up there along that defensive line. And how about Rontez Miles as well, because he'll be representing the special teams. But this is Gase's first year with the Jets, and he said that this is a unique opportunity because he's never been able to be with a quarterback like Sam Darnold at this point in their careers. Live 22 years old, and Gase is the offensive signal caller. He hired Greg Williams to take care of the defense, to be the head coach of the defense, but you could sense the energy from the Jets head coach today. It is game week, and he'll be ready to get to clash with Sean McDermott, the Bills head coach, who that Bills defense very good last year, first in the NFL in terms of pass defense. So Adam Gase matching up against Sean McDermott and the defensive coordinator there with the Bills, Leslie Frazier.
And if you don't know a lot about Adam Gase, one thing you should know is that he is so pumped. I don't know if I've ever seen a head coach this pumped to see his team and to start a season. We saw a little bit of that in the preseason, how excited he was on the sidelines. But one thing that he did mention that stood out was it takes a quarter of a season to really understand what kind of a team you have.
Yeah, in some kind of way, it is an extended preseason because you're still feeling everything out. With all that being said, all these games count. You only play 16 in the regular season, and like we've mentioned, the Jets start off with 2 at home, and the divisional games matter even more. A lot of guys throughout the National Football League will tell you these would count basically a game and a half, and you really want to hold serve at home. But yeah, Gase has brought the energy. He is also a very cerebral guy. I like what he does in terms of bringing it on the offensive side of the ball as a play caller, because he mixes things up, different personnel packages. He spreads the ball around, and the Jets have more weapons at their disposal in 2019 than we can remember. You think about a loaded back. You think about that loaded backfield: LeVeon Bell, Ty Montgomery, Bilal Powell still here. The top 3 at the wide receiver position: Robbie Anderson, Quincy Anuno, of course, Jameson Crowder. Chris Herndon, you won't be having him for the first 4 games this season. But the Jets have a lot of weapons. And again, it's all centered around that quarterback, that young quarterback who we anticipate is ready to take a sophomore leap.
You mentioned some of the weapons that the Jets have. You said Robbie Anderson.
Yeah.
Last week we heard news that he was day-to-day with a calf injury, and we also as well know that Tremaine Johnson was out most of training camp with a hamstring injury, but Adam Gase recently said that these 2 players are trending up, and that is great news heading into week 1.
Well, yeah, in terms of the roster, the Jets kept 5 cornerbacks, so that tells me, and I was just writing about it before we came outside today, that signals to me that Tremaine Johnson's feeling just fine. In fact, Adam Gase said on Monday, both Tremaine Johnson, who we're watching right now on the practice field, and Robbie Anderson, who dealt with a calf injury, calf ailment, they're ready to go. And the Jets kept 5 cornerbacks. For months now, we knew who their top 3 were going to be. Tremaine Johnson's going to be your number 1. Across the way, Darrell Roberts. And then at that all-important nickel position is Brian Poole. Brian Poole, tough assignment this week. He'll be matched up against Cole Beasley, the former Dallas Cowboys slot receiver, who's quickly becoming one of Josh Allen's top targets in Buffalo.
Now, when we think of one of the biggest weapons that the Jets have, obviously it's second-year quarterback Sam Darnold. Darnold versus Josh Allen. We know that these 2 guys are best friends, right? Maybe not best friends, but very close friends. We've seen them interact off the field during the offseason. They spent time together in California. So we know these 2 are friends. So it's interesting to now have these 2 quarterbacks that were both taken in the first round of the 2018 draft to now come as divisional foes, and they're both opening up week 1 against one another.
Well, they're going to be forever linked. There's no doubt about that. The Jets moved up in the 2018 draft to take Sam Darnold out of USC with that 3rd overall selection. The Bills moved up in order to take Wyoming quarterback Josh Allen with the number 7 overall selection. You talked about it, that these guys are close friends. They spent some of their off-season before the rookie year together, training together, and they did it again after their first professional season. Different quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, I think you would say definitely he's the more accurate guy. I think he's more of a threat inside the pocket. Where Josh Allen gets really dangerous is when he escapes the pocket. But both these guys can make plays on the move. That's what I've been saying for years. I think that's what makes 14 special, is his feet and his ability to improvise, because there are times when Sam Darnold might not make the right decision or the right read, but he's such a tremendous athlete. And we've seen times out here on the practice field and throughout the preseason where he's been able to overcome a mistake because he's just got it. He's got something that you just can't teach. He's got a unique ability in terms of what he can do with his arm and his feet, thrown at different angles, great arm strength, and then he can pick up yards on the ground with his feet, but he also can get outside that pocket, and he keeps his eyes down the field, and then you have a chance for explosion plays.
And then, you can even think about what wide receivers coach Sean Jefferson always says. He says, he's that dude. I've never seen somebody be able to throw the ball like him. So it's nice to hear that his his coaches besides just offensive coordinator Dal and then Adam Gase praising Sam Darnold. You have some of the other coaches really talking about his strengths. So you know that they're noticing that in practice.
Listen, the other thing about Darnold is he's got that even temperament. I think he's perfect for New York. He doesn't really care about being a star off the field. He just wants to go out, play football, and win games. He's embraced this system from day one with Gase. He's talked about, hey, listen, get after me once in a while. Yell in my ear. I like that. And he's a fiery guy. Remember what happened with him when he started his professional career in Detroit. First throw in the National Football League, returned for a touchdown. He came back, the Jets winning that game, and he played well in that. The preseason opener against the Giants, he was almost picked off, but then he leads the Jets down the field for a touchdown. So he's a fiery guy, but he's also steady, a great demeanor for this market in this organization as well.
One player that's going to make his life a little bit easier, one player that's going to make Sam Darnold's life a little bit easier, is running back LeVeon Bell. He's going to be making his official return to the NFL this Sunday. Obviously, he did not participate in the preseason, and head coach Adam Gase explained why he wanted to, save LeVeon Bell for the regular season. But, I mean, this is a guy who has not played football since 2017. That's a long time.
Yeah, and I was just taking a peek at the quarterbacks right there. It should be noted that the Jets have two quarterbacks on the active roster. Trevor Siemian, the veteran backup behind Sam Darnold. Luke Falk on the practice squad. And there he is, Le'Veon Bell, talking with Adam Gase. Le'Veon Bell, what does he think about his new head coach?
Their interaction says it all.
He said, an offensive mastermind. And he had a message for Coach Gase earlier in the week. Don't hold back. Whatever you're doing in terms of the play, the game plan, I'm ready to roll. And he's talked about expectations. I think, Liv, people have forgotten just how good of a player Le'Veon Bell is. And Adam Gase talked about today, this dude is a big guy. 6'1", 6'2", 225, 230. Doesn't have much body fat at all. He can run you over. He can make you miss. If he wanted to, if he elected to play wide receiver, he'd be a good wide receiver in the National Football League. But Gase can do anything he wants with them. Line him up behind Sam Darnold, use him in the slot, get him outside the numbers, and you're going to be able to dictate matchups. And that's what the Jets have continually said about Le'Veon Bell bringing him in here, is that you're going to be able to tell the defense, hey, this is what we're going to do. Who are you going to take away? It's going to be awfully tough to take away everybody on that Jets offensive roster. And Ty Montgomery's backing them up too. You might see Ty Montgomery out there on the field at the same time as Le'Veon Bell. These guys have versatile skill sets. But this dude, Bell, embracing expectations. We saw his workload increase during practice throughout the summer. He did not play in any game action. Nothing to prove there. Getting him 3 or 4 carries. All signs go against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday.
Le'Veon Bell, like you mentioned, has talked pretty heavily about how he thinks people are underestimating them. And one time I remember in a press conference, he said, when you don't see something for a long time, you kind of forget what that person is capable of. He actually posted on his Twitter and Instagram yesterday one coach who has not forgotten some of the abilities that he has, and that's Oakland Raiders coach John Gruden. He was in the film room talking to his players about Le'Veon Bell, and he said, who is this guy? They said Le'Veon Bell. He said, what I love about this guy is he will ring your bell. So some people, haven't forgotten who he is.
It's a great point, because he is a complete running back. He's a complete offensive weapon, because if you need Le'Veon Bell and blitz protection, he can pick guys up. Again, the size of Le'Veon is something that I think gets lost because of the diverse skill set this guy has. But he can do anything on a football field. He really can.
Yeah, and people that are going to be able to help him and help his game is going to be that offensive line for the Jets. pretty interesting. Not sure if a lot of people know this or not, but the starting offensive line has yet to take a game snap together. So something that I think people will be keeping an eye on is that chemistry and how quickly they are able to build that chemistry together. Center Ryan Khalil, we are expecting him to be making his debut with the Jets on the field this Sunday. Again, not 100% sure, but expecting him to make his debut. Him and Sam Darnold's chemistry is going to be critical on this offensive line.
Well, he's a 5-time Pro Bowler?
13-year veteran.
Yeah, 34 years old. He's seen everything that you could possibly see in the National Football League. So I would anticipate that communication to be good off the bat, both USC alums. And they were spending a lot of time together inside the building over the course of the last couple weeks. The other offseason addition in terms of starters up front, left guard Kelechi Osemele is going to be a tone setter. He has a nasty mindset out there on the football field. He also is another former Pro Bowler himself. I think he's feeling very comfortable here with his new squad. Brian Winters we're watching him right now. He dealt with the shoulder injury in the summer, but he's all set to go. He'll be manning that right guard position. And then we mentioned Beecham before. He is one of the Jets' 6 captains. He'll be protecting Sam Darnold's backside, the left tackle there. And then Brandon Shell will be your right tackle on the opposite side. But the interior is where we see the most significant differences between 2018 and 2019 is that Khalil gives you that veteran presence at the center position, and you have Jonathan Harrison behind him. And Harrison is a guy who Joe Douglas said had an amazing camp. He provides some depth behind you if Khalil does, in fact, get that start on Sunday. And Osemele, I think you're going to see the Jets run a lot to the left this year because this guy is a force and he can get after it like I mentioned before.
And Jets GM Joe Douglas, obviously he was a former offensive lineman, and as soon as he came into the organization, he noted how important the offensive line was and how it was going to be an area that he made sure was going to be ready to go by week 1. And when you look at the start of training camp, where maybe at some point it was a question about the offensive line, now it might be considered a strength with all the additions.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because the depth is better because you bring in Khalil, it helps your depth. And then you trade for Alex Lewis. He's a guy who started the last 2 preseason games for you. Tom Compton, number 77, you're watching him right now out there on the practice field. He's a veteran in the National Football League. Those guys did some good things, especially, I thought, against Atlanta when they got that start against the Falcons in week 2 of this summer. Frank Pollock is your new offensive line coach. But again, they'll be protecting Sam Darnold and opening holes for LeVeon Bell.
Well, the offensive line isn't the only position that underwent some change. Special teams also underwent some change this past offseason. Before finalizing the 53-man roster, let's now toss it to Ethan Greenberg, who will have more information on that. Ethan?
Thanks, Liv. Very busy weekend for the Jets, and particularly Jets general manager Joe Douglas and his personnel staff over the weekend. 4 total waiver claims. 2 of them will play an immediate role on special teams, and one of them is directly behind me. That's kicker Corey Vedvik, comes from the Minnesota Vikings, and really, he's had an up and down preseason when you think about where he started with the Baltimore Ravens. Spent last year on the reserve non-football injury list. Was very impressive in the preseason 2 years ago. Very impressive this preseason with the Ravens. In the preseason opener, 4 of 4, including a 55-yard boot. Then he gets traded to the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings gave up a 5th-round pick, and then he was eventually waived. Did not find success in the preseason in Minnesota. Only went 1 for 4 with the Vikings, and he comes here. And if you remember, it wasn't the same timing, but the Jets made a late summer waiver claim last season, and Jason Myers, who had a fantastic year with the green and white. Not saying that will be the case with Vedvik, but hopefully the Jets think that Vedvik will regain his form here with the Jets, the same form that was in the Baltimore Ravens when he had success. And really quickly here on Braxton Berrios, the Jets' new receiver and punt returner. Adam Gase said, I'm very familiar with him from his college days because Gase was the coach of the Miami Dolphins. Braxton Berrios went to the University of Miami, and he was very, very, very talented there for the Hurricanes. 10.4 yards per punt return. He will be the starter and Sunday, and that's all we have here on the field. Liv, back to you.
Thanks to Ethan Greenberg giving us some information on kicker Corey Vedvik and wide receiver Braxton Berrios. So we know that they were added to the 53-man roster. We know that we will be able to see them in game action this Sunday. But now moving on, switching gears, let's talk about some of the defensive backs. Earlier in the show, you mentioned how the Jets are now carrying 5 cornerbacks. That's a significant amount, but it also shows that there's going to be some confidence in some of those starters that we saw throughout training camp.
Yeah, and we talked about that at the onset. That signals to me that Tremaine Johnson, A-OK, ready to go against the Buffalo Bills, and the Jets are going to need him this season. And remember, Johnson is a guy who has experienced his most success throughout his career under Denard Wilson, who you interviewed this week for the Adam Gase Show, 11:30 Sunday a.m. CBS here locally, but we'll also show that digitally as well. But under Wilson and defensive coordinator Greg Williams while they were with the Rams. So if the Jets can get that kind of Jermaine Johnson this season as the wind picks up out here and we got monitors flying and Frank Lazar doing a yeoman-like job here, holding on to everything because the camera almost went. But if the Jets can get Tremaine Johnson to play 16 games like he did a couple years ago with the LA Rams, with the Rams under Wilson and Williams, that's going to go a long way for the secondary. And monster opportunity for Darryl Roberts, a guy who he cross-trained last year, played some free safety when Marcus May went down, also at the cornerback position, more back to he is the starter on the outside opposite Tremaine Johnson. This week, the Bills are going to present some speed on the outside. John Brown, a newcomer, he can run, and Josh Allen can throw the ball out of the stadium. So you got to keep the ball in front of you. Cole Beasley, that's going to be Brian Poole's assignment this week. You got to get physical with him because Josh Allen's going to be looking at him on third down. And they got a couple other guys on the outside in Zay Jones and Robert Foster. And Foster's another guy who could be unattractive.
We'll see how it goes and how it all plays out in the Jets' home opener this Sunday at 1 p.m. against the Buffalo Bills. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for you today on Practice Today, presented by SiriusXM. But before we go, we are going to leave you with Ethan Greenberg, who interviewed Dane Brugler for a new segment called Brugler's Draft Board. Check it out.
Welcome inside the Play MGM studios. Ethan Greenberg here. Dane Brugler in Ohio for Brugler's Draft Board. Dane, thanks so much for joining us. And without further ado, let's just kick things off. We're going to go right into this. We're going to analyze a couple different college football games. Let's go to Texas, where number 6 LSU takes on the number 10 Longhorns. I know that you, in particular, have your eyes on a couple prospects.
The big prospect matchup I'll be focused on really going to be Sam Ehlinger, the Longhorn starting quarterback, versus strong safety Grant Delpit. Ehlinger's in that Tim Tebow type of mold where he's a dual threat passer, dual threat athlete, but he has that competitive makeup that you love. As that leader, he's steadily developed each season as a passer. Can he make the LSU, can he scare the LSU defense with his arm? That'll be the big thing to watch. And he's a Heisman contender, so LSU knows about him. They'll be ready for him. And it starts with their defensive leader, and that's Grant Delpit. He's a Derwin James type of player. We know LSU has been a DB factory the last few years. I know I don't have to tell Jets fans that with the way Jamal Adams has performed since he entered the league as a top 10 pick. But, talking to some people around that LSU program, they think Delpit could be the best of the group. One more prospect matchup that I know scouts are going to have a close eye on, Texas wide receiver Colin Johnson versus LSU corner Christian Fulton. Johnson, 6'6", he has a tremendous catch radius, and he's a better route runner than I think people give him credit for. He is my top senior receiver entering the year, trying to get in that top 50 mix. And then on the defensive side of the ball, scouts are really hoping they see him go against Fulton because he is a matchup. It's a matchup of two future NFL starters. Fulton He came back last year from suspension. He outplayed Greedy Williams for that Tigers defense. He has all the makings to be a top 20 pick, and he's in that conversation, be the first corner drafted.
All right, let's head out west now. Cal at Washington. Let's talk about some underrated prospects here. I know that you have your eye on Cal free safety Ashton Davis.
Yeah, this is one of the better stories and one of the better players when we talk about the draft prospects in the 2020 class. Ashton Davis, he's a walk-on, and he used track as a way to get noticed and get on campus. He won the Pac-12 championship in the hurdles. Pretty soon, the football coaches realized, hey, we've got something special here. He's only about 6'1", 200 pounds, so he doesn't have maybe that prototypical size that you're looking for in a safety, a little leaner than you want, but he hits like a truck and he plays much, much tougher than he looks. But I think his speed really stands out, and it's going to be tested against the Washington Huskies on Saturday. Jacob Eason, transfer from Georgia. We haven't seen him in a couple years, but he's a former five-star guy. He sat out last year as a transfer. He got hurt at Georgia. Jake Fromm came in, kind of took over that program. But last week, Jacob Eason just took apart Eastern Washington's defense. Now, it's an FCS team. This will be a step up. Cal's got one of the better secondaries in the Pac-12, led by Ashton Davis. So it's going to be more of a test for both Jacob Eason, quarterback for Washington, and Ashton Davis, the senior safety at Cal.
All right, you mentioned Eason, 349 yards and 4 touchdowns in Washington's 47-14 victory. Let's just wrap things up with some upsets. Everybody loves an underdog. Let's go to Nebraska at Colorado, and I know that the Buffaloes have a very talented receiver.
They do, but if we're talking about an upset, I'm going with Colorado, and the main reason is the man who wears number 2. You mentioned him, wide receiver Laviska Shenault. He's a true playmaker, strong acceleration, the ball skills that you want. So for me, he enters the year as a potential top 10 pick, and he's right there with Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb to be the top wide receiver prospect in the nation.
All right, there you have it. The first installment of Brugler's Draft Board. We'll be talking to Dane throughout the college football season and as we inch closer to the draft. Dane, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ethan.